One of the other ways that are other things that's going to come up in this call is setting mutual expectations and next steps. If you have all heard of Sandler sales training, they have this whole thing called the upfront contract. While I think it's great because it helps you to set expectations, the term upfront contract implies this one-way conversation where you're delivering a contract and they're either agreeing to it or disagreeing to it, which is how most people execute on it. So we're going to talk about how to do that in a way that's collaborative with your buyer. And I'll give you a hint, has a lot to do with that email that you tried to send them a few days before. Then we're going to get into, in that call, then we get into our questions. So first, building of the rapport, establishing that connections, setting the expectations with them mutually, and then starting to get into our open-ended collaborative questions that we ask in sequential orders. And then finally, one of the other things that you're going to be doing in this first conversation, and this is why your research is so important, is that you want to add summaries of what you've heard and then add insights into what you've heard there. This is something that buyers so one thing buyers value the most is collaborative questions. They value that because it helps them to think differently about their problems, but they also want sellers who are going to be able to deliver to them insights that they didn't know or hadn't fully considered before. This is where you need to add more value than the Google search engines can. And because of your expertise, you're in the perfect position to do that. And then finally, how do you customize the solution after going through those discovery questions? You've found these bits of gold that you can start leaning into. How do you tie that into what you do and how it's going to help them? We're going to talk about that towards the end. And that's also going to help us segue into next week when we start digging into even deeper questions during discovery. All right. So don't forget the next steps. This is the very last thing in your call. And the reason that we do the mutual expectation setting and next steps is so that when we get to the end of the conversation, it's not a surprise as to what we need to do next. We've already agreed that if we meet these certain criteria throughout the conversation, we're going to do this at the end. And scheduling another call is usually what that next step is going to be. And we want to do it right then and there. Don't try to do it in email, but we'll get into the details. Inside the conversation itself, you're going to summarize what you've heard them say and then offer an insight into that, maybe some other data point or trend or something that you've seen in working with people that they didn't really mention or that maybe you don't know that they realized, and then going back and asking additional diagnostic questions around that. So it's kind of like you ask 3 or 4 questions and then you say, oh, so what I've heard is blah, 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 blah. The reason we do that is because, one, we don't want it to feel like an interrogation to our buyers where we're asking all of the questions and they're giving us all of the answers. I want it to feel like a natural conversation that goes back and forth, right? Like when you have a conversation with anyone, it's typically you ask a couple of questions, you say a couple of things as far as what you think or what you've seen, then you ask some more questions and you go back and forth like that. That's exactly how I want to do it in discovery. And also you're going to send a summary email afterwards too. Awesome. All right. So how do we build rapport? It is surprising to me still when people come to me and say, I don't know how to do small talk, when they do it all the time. They just don't even realize that they're doing it all the time. So what are some intentional ways that you can build rapport? Again, keeping in mind the personality style, the communication style of the other person. First way, and the easiest way for me to be able to do this, if you've gotten a referral, you already have something in common to build a relationship off of. And so, one of the first questions that you can ask is, so how do you know Carol? And then go into that conversation from there and how you know me and blah, 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 blah. But whatever that common connection is, I want to find out what the relationship is there and how my relationship with them ties in. A lot of times, the person who's referring you is much like the person that is going to be talking to you. And so you're going to probably have some commonalities there. If you don't, that might be a little bit of a red flag. All right. Another way to easily build rapport and actually have something in common is when you're looking at their connections. When you're looking at their LinkedIn profile and their career path and their education, you're probably going to find something in that profile or even on Facebook that you have in common with them. For example, I was talking with someone the other day and found out that we both like the same kind of music, the same kind of food, and we used to live in the same area. And this was just some random person who I had connected with on LinkedIn. So there's always going to be something that you can find in common. It might be, you know what, Greg, I'm really fascinated by the fact that you went to college for this, but then you ended up doing that. How did you get from here to there? Tell me that story. And who doesn't love telling you their story, right? That's the whole name of this game. Another way that you can build rapport quite easily is when you found something that they wrote or an interview where they said something in particular that really resonated with you. Maybe they've written a book, maybe they have a blog, maybe they've done a lot of interviews, or even just something that they've posted on their LinkedIn or social profiles that really resonated with you. Really loved what you had to say about this particular thing. I've seen that happen as well, and here's my thoughts on it. That's an easy way to align yourself with whatever their belief system might be. And then when all else fails and you're on a video Zoom call, look at their background. Most people that I talk with these days, especially during the pandemic, have their backgrounds littered with whatever it is that they love to do, whether it's guitars or, weird paintings or things like that. I've had people with strange statues in the back that I've asked about and then wished I hadn't asked about. So there are all options, though, for you to be able to say, I am completely fascinated by what you have going on in the background there. What is that? Or if it's a guitar, I used to play guitar. I used to be in a rock band. I literally just had to have my hearing tested because I was in too many rock bands. So whatever it is that you find on their profile that resonates with you, in their background, that's something to key in on and just say, oh, I really love what are those wooden ball things in your background? What are those for? Anything will help you to sort of break that ice. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do when I'm building rapport with someone is to get them to laugh, to get them to smile, anything that to get them to show some kind of an emotion. But smiling and laughter, that's one of the ways that we actually start to build trust with people, because we don't laugh or smile with people that we don't like or people that we're not willing to build trust with. I mean, think about what happens when you laugh. You throw your head back, you're exposing your neck, you're making yourself vulnerable. That is ultimately, for me, what my goal in rapport building is if I can get you to laugh, I gotcha. All right. What does that sound like when we're setting expectations, which is our next step? So we've sent the email asking them, what is it that you would like to cover in this conversation? The next step in that is reiterating that. So say you send the email, but they never replied to it. That's okay, because now you can ask the question when you're setting the expectations. What is it that you're most interested in learning about today? Here's what it might sound like. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for taking the time to talk with me today about managing my social media platform for my book launch. Now, based on what you've shared via email, it sounds like you need to learn more about how the book launch is going to impact my ability to do X. And I'm actually just reversing that role. I have some questions for you about that to learn more, and I hope to offer some insights for you that might help. By the end of the call, if we both agree that there's more to discuss here and that we should move forward in determining how I might be able to help you, would you be willing to schedule another call, say next week, and we can explore those options? But if it's not something that you think is going to work for you, happy to end the call early, and maybe we can find someone else who can help you. There's three major keys to this right now. One is obviously thanking them for their time and confirming how much time that you have and that this is the topic we're going to talk about. The other part is I've got some questions for you, and I hope to be able to offer some help with some insights. And then getting to that, if we both agree that this is something worthwhile, if we both find that you think that this is a solution that will work and we agree that it's a fit, that by the end of this call, we can schedule a more in-depth call to see how that rollout might look. Or if we find that halfway through this call that this isn't really clicking and it doesn't line up with what you were thinking, we can end the call early and either refer someone else or find someone that can do this solution for you. You always want to give them that option of an out, because if the only option for a next step after this is to continue this conversation, they're probably not going to be very willing to do that. And if you get to the end of the call with the agreed that by the end of this call, we're going to set next steps for another conversation, and they're not willing to do it, that's where you want to start digging into. Is there something that's not lining up with you that you don't think that this is a fit? Or what is it that's missing right now that you're not sure if the next conversation makes sense? You can dig into that right away. and disqualify them out sooner rather than later so that nobody's wasting their time. The important thing here is a lot of times what happens is we feel like we've had this great discovery call, but then it peters out and doesn't go anywhere. A lot of times it's because we haven't established the expectation of setting a next step, so that when they get to the end of the call, we're not really sure what to do. And we're kind of like, maybe I'll just email you some details and then we'll figure out when to talk next. And it never happens.